So let's build this LBO model. You are a junior analyst at that mid-market private equity fund. Your managing partner has just sent you this brief. We are looking at HealthCo, an Italian private healthcare group operating a network of diagnostic outpatient clinics across the USA. The business has been growing steadily, supported by an increasing private healthcare demand and a fragmented market with limited institutional competition. We have revenues at entry 120 million euros. So EBITDA margin 22%, so 26.4 million euros. Revenue growth year over year 5%. D&A 4% of revenue because it's a asset heavy business with medical equipment. Capex 3% of revenue. Working capital slight cash absorption, so let's assume a 0.5% of revenue per year, and tax rate of 24%. Now the business currently carries 60 million euros of existing debt, and we are refinancing it as part of the transaction. We are buying the business at 10x EBITDA, so an entry enterprise value of 264 million. We will check it later. The deal is financed as follows. Tranche A, senior debt of 140 million euros at 6.5% cash interest per year, and this is the senior tranche. So it's repaid first via full cash sweep from free cash flow. Tranche B, PIK Note, so 40 million euros at 11% PIK interest per year. So interest is not paid in cash, it accrues and compounds annually on the outstanding principal. So the full PIK balance, including all accrued interest, is repaid in full at exit. Sponsor equity, 84 million euros. Total sources must equal total uses. So let's verify it before proceeding. Holding period 5 years, exit multiple 10x EBITDA, no multiple expansion. And so we want to build a full LBO model. We want to calculate the returns, so MOIC and RRR. So let's start. So figures in euro million. Let's make these columns a little bigger. And so I want everything in Calibri, font size 11. So now let's go to our input section. So first of all, our purchase assumptions. So we want our entry EBITDA, entry multiple, so that we can calculate our enterprise value at entry. We then need to add the net debt, and so minus that plus cash, entry equity value. Let's format these numbers. Okay, so we have a entry EBITDA of 26.4, which is an input, so we will color it as blue so that it is understandable that it's an input. Then we have an entry multiple of 10. This is also an input, so blue. And the enterprise value will be calculated as entry EBITDA times entry multiple. The debt, we know that the business currently carries 60 million euros of existing debt, and so minus 60. This is also an input. And we have zero cash, so the entry equity value is 204 million euros. We then need to write our cash flow projections assumptions. And so we have revenues, entry revenues of entry revenues of 120 million. Entry EBITDA, we've already written it. Then we have a year-over-year growth of 5%. Then we have D&A, CapEx, delta, net working capital, and tax rate. So for the D&A, we know that is 4% of revenues. CapEx, it will be 3%. Delta net working capital will be 0.5. And tax rate is 24%. Okay. Then let's go to our financing assumptions. So we know that we have our senior debt and our PIK. So we know that our senior debt amounts to 140 million. And our PIK is 40 million euros. The interest rate of the senior debt is 6.5%. And the PIK is 11%. Now our exit assumptions. And so we have an exit multiple of 10 and an holding period of 5. Perfect. So let's now formulate our sources and uses table. So we have our uses of capital. So we will purchase our company's equity with the money that we will raise, and so 204. Then, as we said in the exercise, we want to refinance the existing debt, and so we will use the capital that we will raise to to refinance the 60 million euros that were in our balance sheet. Then we will have also some transaction fees for the operation. In this case, we will write that it's 0 since there is no insights from the script. But usually we would consider at least, well, it depends a lot on the transaction, but around 1 million euros for mid-cap transactions, from 500k and 1 million. So these are our uses of capital. Let's go to our sources of capital. And so we said that we have our senior debt, our PIK, and also the sponsor equity. So the senior debt is 140. The PIK is 40. We can calculate the sponsor equity as the difference between the total amount of sources of capital, which is equal to the uses of capital, and the debt raised. Perfect. The sponsor equity actually was also an input, but yeah, we can do it as the script says. So now we can check if they are correct. Okay. Let's go to our cash flow projections. So we have year 0 to year 5. We said that the holding period is 5 years. We will format this period with year so that it's more comprehensible. Then we have our revenues. So we said that revenues are 120 million at year 0, and we also have a year-over-year revenue growth of 8%. Sorry, 5%. So we can calculate the following revenues using this formula, where we multiply the revenue growth times the revenue of the previous year. Well, we calculate the revenue the revenue at year 1 as revenue of year 0 times 1 plus the year-over-year growth rate. Let's format these numbers. Okay, then we will go to our operating expenses. We don't know any insights about our operating expenses, so we will calculate them as the difference between revenues and EBITDA. Since we know that entry EBITDA is 26.4, we can have the difference between EBITDA and revenues. Sorry. So EBITDA margin is calculated dividing EBITDA times revenues. So it's 22%. We assume that, as the script says, that it will be kept the same. So we can then multiply the EBITDA margin times the revenues. Now let's go to our D&A. We know that the D&A are equal to 4% of revenues. So now we are able to calculate EBIT. And so now the interest expenses. The interest expenses will start from year 1, since we will buy the company at year 0, but the debt will start accruing interest only from year 1. So we will leave blank, this part, and we will proceed with EBT, so pre-tax income, which will be calculated as the difference between EBIT and interest expenses. For the interest expenses, we first need to calculate our free cash flow and our debt schedule, and only from there we can calculate how much expenses we have over interest. We can proceed with the taxes. We know that taxes are 44% of the pre-tax income, and so our net income is equal to the difference between the two of them. Perfect. So let's go to our free cash flow. To calculate our free cash flow, we first need to start back from the net income. We then need to add back our D&A. We need to subtract CapEx, and we know that CapEx are 3% of revenues. And then we need to add or subtract our delta in net working capital. And in this case, there's an increase of net working capital every year of 0.5% of revenues. So our free cash flow is equal to the sum of all of these items. So as a waterfall, we will get our free cash flow. Let's now go back to our debt schedule, and the exercise was asking to obviously divide the debt schedule of the senior debt and of the PIK. So let's start by projecting again our period. So we have our senior debt, and we have our beginning of period, cash sweep, and end of period. Also for the PIK, and so in this case we have PIK, but here it will be the accrued interest of PIK, accrued interest PIK. So as we said, we will start from year one with a senior debt of 140 million, and at year one we will have a cash sweep of 17.9 million euros. As we said, there's this is the senior tranche, and it's repaid first via full cash sweep from free cash flow. So every euro generated of free cash flow will be used to repay the senior debt. And the PIK note is not paid in cash. It accrues and compounds annually on the outstanding principal. So the full PIK balance, including all accrued interest, is repaid in full at exit. So our debt balance of the senior debt can be formulated like this. Sorry, years. Okay, can be formulated like this. And so now we can do the same for our PIK. And so we have 40 million euros of PIK. Also, this PIK will accrue every single year. And so we will have that the interest is actually, calculated every year. We have the sum at the end of period, and the beginning of period of year 2 will be the end of period of year 1. Let's format the numbers. So actually, our only interest expenses of, on the P&L will be relative to the senior debt. And so we can calculate the interest expenses as the beginning of period senior debt of each year times the interest rate of the senior debt. Okay. Now that we have everything, we can go for, our sale value and exit returns. So we have exit EBITDA, exit multiple, exit enterprise value minus debt plus cash, exit equity value. Exit EBITDA, we know it's 33.7. Exit multiple is actually the same as entry. So let's customize it. So the exit enterprise value will be, and exit EBITDA times the exit multiple. The debt will be the sum of the end of period at year 5 of the senior debt and the end of period of the PIK at year 5. So at the end of the year 5, we have two types of debt, the senior debt and the PIK. So it will be calculated as the sum of the two of them. We don't have any cash because every euro generated as free cash flow has been used to, repay the senior debt. And so our exit equity value will be the sum, will be the sum of these three. And so we can proceed with our MOIC and our IRR. We know that the fund has generated an equity value, exit equity value of roughly 200 million euros, and the initial equity investment was 84 million. While the IRR can be formulated and calculated as, the MOIC elevated to 1 divided by the number of years, so 5 minus 1. And so we have an investment which is of 2.4 times the initial equity investment of the fund, and an IRR which is in line with the industry